Good evening to you all, and a very warm welcome to you all. And it's with great pleasure that we welcome the distinguished speaker for this evening, Professor Ravi Subramanian. He is currently the director of Raman Research Institute in Bangalore, and Professor Ravi Subramanian, he graduated from IIT Chennai. So he is actually a scientist come engineer, or an engineer come scientist. So his research is split between both pure science research as well as engineering research. He is into basically experimental research which involves studying the cosmological background radiation at wavelengths that you and I cannot perceive. He works in the radio universe, and that is the major part of the talk that he is going to speak to us today. And he is also interested in the study of active galaxies, especially the radio galaxies and their cosmological evolution. We are indeed very happy that Professor Ravi Subramanian is here. So we welcome him once again, and now we request him to address the gathering. Thank you very much.
So thank you all for coming this evening. The talk that I have prepared for today is on radio waves from the early universe. And what I'm going to talk about is work that some of us are involved in at the Raman Research Institute in Bangalore. And during this talk, I will introduce you to the field of cosmology, and then go on to the field of radio astronomy. And what I will try to do is to give you a glimpse of how radio astronomy is used to understand the evolution of our universe and how we can see further than anybody else can. And towards the end, I will talk about what we are doing for the future, what are the unsolved problems, so you have a feeling of where we are and where we are going. Right? So this is the way the field has progressed, and I will give you a historical introduction to the field and point towards the future. And my emphasis will be on work that we are doing here in Bangalore, so you have an appreciation of what is possible here in the city. So I'm starting with some pictures of buildings. Right? So now when you see buildings of this kind, the question that I have for you is, what are buildings made of? Yeah. So nobody said atoms. Right? So when we look at buildings, what comes to our mind is buildings are made of bricks and iron and steel and that kind of things. Right? We don't say bricks are made of atoms. Right? So buildings are made of bricks, stone, steel, wood. These are the kind of things that go to make a building. So a building has its structure because of how we arrange these bricks, how we put the wood and steel in place. Right? That gives structure to the building. So then we can ask the question, what is the universe made of? Right? Just like buildings are made of these, what is the universe made of? Yeah, some questions? No. Yeah, right. So the universe is not made of stars. The universe, we say, is made of galaxies. So the shape of the universe is decided by how galaxies are placed, not atoms or stars. Just like a building is made of bricks, similarly a universe is made of galaxies. That's the relationship. Right? So the universe is made of galaxies, and that's the starting point. Now we live in one such galaxy which we call the Milky Way. So I have a picture of the Milky Way. That's our galaxy. Right? And close to us we have more galaxies. Roughly galaxies have a certain size. The galaxies are like bricks for us, and galaxies are separated in space by about 10 times their size, and there is a distribution of galaxies. Now just like bricks don't come in one particular kind, similarly galaxies also don't come in one particular kind, but they are roughly the same size. So we have different kinds of galaxies, and here I have an image which shows different kinds of galaxies that make up our universe. So there are galaxies that some may be irregular, some are spiral, some are elliptical, And often galaxies are a mix of a disk and a bulge. And so sometimes the bulge is more prominent, and so we call it elliptical. Sometimes the disk is more prominent, and so we call it spiral. It's just what is more prominent in a particular galaxy. So the universe is made of galaxies. And between the galaxies, there is gas. Okay? So the universe is not just galaxies. There are galaxies, but there is also gas between galaxies. Right? That is our universe. So then we can ask, how are these galaxies distributed to make up our universe? Now, galaxies are not distributed randomly. Just like bricks in a building are not distributed randomly. Galaxies are distributed in particular patterns. So if we take a picture of our universe, we have galaxies. And when we look close, yes, there are lots of galaxies. If we back off and look at the universe, this is the kind of structures that we have actually seen. So galaxies are not random, they are distributed in these patterns. So this picture is some small area here. Right? So on a large scale, galaxies have certain shapes. Galaxies are distributed along chains, sheets, filaments. There are regions where there are more galaxies, there are regions where there are less galaxies. There's a certain structure to this whole thing. A galaxy is roughly about 10, what we call 10 kiloparsec in size. It's about 30,000 light years in size. Galaxies are separated by distances about 10 times that amount. So galaxies are separated by what we call 1 megaparsec, or 3 million light years. These structures have a size which is about 100 megaparsec. And if we back off and look at the universe from far away, this is what we see. On the global average, it is homogeneous, but there is structure on smaller scales. Right? So this is our picture of the universe. Just like a building has a shape, the universe has this kind of structure to it. And that structure comes because galaxies are distributed in these particular patterns. Right? So this is what our universe is made of. There are these galaxies, and between galaxies, there is gas. Right? So what are we trying to do? As astronomers or cosmologists, what are we trying to do? We are trying to understand why the universe is the way it is. We are trying to understand how galaxies have formed and why they are distributed in these patterns. Right? That is the fundamental problem that we are trying to answer. So what I have here is a picture actually of Bangalore. You might not recognize it, but it's actually a part of Bangalore. Yeah, that's right. So this is a part of Bangalore, and when we see a city from the air, we can ask the question, why does the city have the structure that we see? Right? Just like the universe has a certain structure, we can look at the city and ask, why does it have this structure? How do we understand the reason why it has this structure? And to do that, what we engage in is, we find the answer by studying history. We look at the history of the city, how people have migrated into this place, how the sociology has evolved over time, and it is by studying the history do we understand the present. The present is always studied in the light of history. And it is that history that we have to understand to know what it is today. Similarly, if we want to know why the universe is what it is today, what do we have to do? To understand the universe, we have to understand its history. Right? So somehow we have to understand the history of the universe to know why it has this structure, why there are galaxies and why the galaxies form these structures. We have to understand its history. So we have to look into the past. We have to see how the universe has evolved in the past. And we have to see it at different times, and then we can see how it has evolved. That seeing through telescopes is what we call astronomy. And seeing into the past is observational cosmology. We observe the cosmos over time. That is what we do as astronomers. Along with that, just looking is not enough. We have to understand the physics of how matter interacts with matter, how matter interacts with radiation, which is what has transformed this universe over time from the beginning to what it is today. These laws we can study in the laboratory, and we can develop our understanding of physics, and it is that development of physics that tells us how the universe has transformed and made it what it is today. So we have to observe and we have to understand physics. Both have to go side by side. So we have often departments which are called astronomy and astrophysics. Both go together. So how do astronomers study the history of the universe? So how do astronomers look into the past? Now, you might not have realized it, but anything that we see is always in the past. Right? So the speed of light is finite. Right? Light travels roughly 1 foot in 1 nanosecond. So anything that we see is already history. So if we look at the sun is 8 light minutes away, it's 8 minutes ago. If you see the sun set, it actually set 8 minutes ago. Right? We are always seeing history. The nearest star is 4 light years away. So we are seeing the history of the star. We are not seeing its present. If we see the nearest galaxy is 180,000 light years ago in the past. The farthest galaxies that we see is 10 billion light years in the past. So this is a huge history. And by looking further and further, we can look into history. So as we look farther and farther in space with more and more powerful telescopes, we look back in time and we see the universe always as it was in the past. So the telescopes that show us the distant universe are not showing the universe as it is today. It is showing us how the universe was in the past. It is not showing us our universe, it is some other part of the universe, but that's the way life is. Light takes time to come to us. So we are always seeing the past. As we look further, we are looking more into the past. And so looking into the past is looking at the history. So this is a deep picture taken by the Hubble Space Telescope. And this is looking back in time. These are distant galaxies. Distant galaxies are our view of the early universe. Right? It is not telling us how the galaxies are today. It is telling us how the galaxies were at that time when the light was emitted and when that light started traveling towards us. Right? So one thing that powerful telescopes like the Hubble Space Telescopes have told us is that as we look at galaxies far away, distant galaxies are different from what they are today. Right? Galaxies seen in the distant universe are not the same as today. So I have a picture here. This is how galaxies look in the distant past. Right? This is how they were. These are nearby galaxies. This is how galaxies are in today's universe. So the universe has actually evolved from this state to this state. Galaxies were like this once upon a time in the past. Today the galaxies are like this, much more regular. Here they are much more fragmented, much more irregular. Today the galaxies are more regular. And there is this evolution. It is because we see the universe evolving, changing over time, and that we see with our telescopes. That is why we believe that the universe is not steady state, it is changing, and the changing universe is what we call Big Bang. The Big Bang universe is a universe that is changing. Because we have seen change, we know it is not static, it is not steady state. There is no doubt because we can see it. There are other evidences for the changing universe. We see objects called quasars. Quasars are actually galaxies, except that at the center there is an extremely bright nucleus called an active galactic nucleus. It's extremely bright because there is a black hole and matter is falling in, and that gravitational energy is being radiated away, and they are extremely bright. So we can look at it at very far distances, and therefore these quasars are like bright lighthouses which we can see out to the edge of the universe. And we can count their numbers, and we can see how the numbers of quasars has changed over time. And we can make plots of how these numbers have changed with time. And what we see when we look at these numbers over time is that the numbers with time have increased and then decreased. So we know that the numbers of quasars in the universe has not been always the same as what it is today. It was more in the past, and further back in time it was lower. It has evolved. Right? That's another evidence that the universe is changing. Then there are bright objects called star-forming galaxies. These are galaxies where there is gas being accreted in enormous amount of star formation, much, much more than what's happening in our Milky Way. And these galaxies are star-forming galaxies. Because there is so much star formation, they are again bright, and we can look at them across the universe and measure the amount of star formation over time. And when we make these plots, again we see that the amount of star formation as a function of time in the universe, in the past there was some level of star formation that increased over time, more and more star formation. Of late, the star formation has been declining. Right? So again, there is this change that is seen. And because we see this change, we know the universe is evolving. Apart from galaxies, there is also gas. Then we can ask, what is happening to the gas between galaxies? How do we look at change in the gas between galaxies? And we can see that gas by looking at distant quasars and looking at the light that comes from quasars, and that light from quasars comes to us through the gas, and wherever the gas is, the light gets absorbed. And by looking at absorption lines in the quasar light, we can know what is happening to gas along the line of sight. All right? So these spectra tell us how the gas has evolved over time. So we can measure the light of quasars at different distances, and when we take quasars that are very far away, we see that all the light is absorbed, which means far away there is a lot of gas in between galaxies. As we come closer, there is less absorption because that gas is disappearing. As we come closer and closer in, there is more light and absorption lines, which means that the gas is no longer uniform between galaxies and it has clumped. And then for nearby quasars, there is no absorption at all, which means the gas has then formed galaxies. So as galaxies form, the gas disappears. So we can see here in the sequence that gas, which was uniform here, over time has clumped and then disappeared as it formed stars. So we see that evolution in gas as the complement of the evolution that we see in galaxies. So all this gives us a certain picture for our universe, right? So we are here sitting in the Milky Way galaxy, and we are looking out with telescopes, in optical light, with optical telescopes. We see galaxies. We can see galaxies around us. As we look farther into the distance, into the past, we see galaxies which are different from today. And we can see galaxies out to a certain distance. Beyond a certain distance, we do not see galaxies. And the reason why we don't see galaxies beyond a certain distance is because beyond a certain time in the past, there were no galaxies. We have seen galaxies to the edge. Beyond that, there are no galaxies to be seen, because galaxies were yet to form. So there is an edge. As we sit here and look out, we can only see galaxies to a certain distance because there is history. Beyond that, it was only gas. There was nothing to emit light. So we don't see galaxies. There are no galaxies and stars out there. Right? We have actually seen out to the edge with our optical telescopes, with the huge optical telescopes that we have built. So we have seen the observable universe of galaxies. Right? And now the question is, what comes beyond? Right? Beyond this is back in time to the time when gas was yet to form galaxies. Okay. So now we live in this expanding universe, and we call it the Big Bang cosmology. Big Bang cosmology refers to this changing universe, expanding universe. The age of the universe in this expansion is 13.7 billion years. This is something we know because we know and can measure the rate of expansion, the rate at which galaxies are moving apart. We know when it was at a point, so we know the age. Now, beyond when the last galaxies are seen, it must be just gas. We have never seen it. Right? Now, what will happen to that gas as we go back in time? In an expanding universe, as we go back, if we go back in time, the gas will become denser. If we take gas and compress it to make it denser, it will get hotter. Right? If gas expands, it gets cooler. So as we go back in time, theoretically we expect that the gas will be denser and hotter. This is what the laws of physics tells us. So as we go back in time, that gas will become denser, and it must get hotter. So somewhere in the past, that gas, as it becomes denser and hotter, somewhere there it will become as hot as the surface of the sun. There will be a time when it becomes as dense and as hot as the surface of the sun, and then it must be as bright as the surface of the sun. Because gas that is as bright and dense and hot as the sun will emit that light. So somewhere in the past, it must be like the surface of the sun. It must get hotter and denser as you go towards the Big Bang. Right? This is theory of the hot Big Bang universe. Now, if it must become hot and dense like the surface of the sun, then can we see it? Where do we see it? Now, this light from that surface there, where it becomes as hot as the sun, right? Beyond that, we can't see in the same way that you can't see inside the sun. But somewhere it will become like the surface of the sun. Beyond that, you can't see, like you can't see into the sun. Now, light will travel from there to us through all this gas, between all the stars. Now, when light travels in the universe and the universe is expanding, the wavelength of the light actually gets stretched. And the wavelength gets stretched, so it moves to lower and lower frequencies, longer and longer wavelengths. The surface of the sun emits optical light, but from that surface, by the time it gets to us, the universe is expanded by a factor of almost 1,000. And therefore, it will get stretched by a factor of 1,000. And then we know that this wavelength cannot be seen in optical wavelengths. The wavelength will be increased by a factor of 1,000. And then from the optical, it will be seen down below in millimeter waves. This was a prediction of this Big Bang model. That if there was gas here that then formed galaxies later, because it's a Big Bang universe, therefore as you go back into the past, somewhere it will be like the surface of the sun, but we can't see sunlight from there, but it will come in radio waves. So this was a firm prediction that was made. Right? So then what happened? So we had people, Penzias and Wilson in 1964, they took this horn, made it into a radio telescope. They actually measured this light. It's light, radio waves. They detected this. And they detected it in 1964, and in 1978, they got the Nobel Prize for having detected this. So they were the first people to actually see this universe. See, when you get light from the wall, we say that we are seeing the wall, right? So if we detect radio waves from this part of the universe, we say we see that universe. It's the same thing. Right? So these people actually saw that universe as it was when it was 1,000 times smaller than today. Right? That's really back in the past, before anything else formed. So this was a theory, and they measured it. Many people, we were also part of it in the Raman Institute. We built something which we took to Gauribidnur, which is about 100 kilometers north of here. We do our experiments away from the city, because in the city, there's a lot of radio emission that comes from all these TV towers, mobile phones. So we have to go outside if we want to see anything out in the universe. So we went 100 kilometers north of here. We built this. We built this to detect radio waves at 1400 megahertz. And we measured the same cosmic radio emission from the early universe. So we measured this in 1995. Many people have measured this since then and measured it at different frequencies. And the most important measurement was done by satellites. And this satellite is what is called the Cosmic Background Explorer. This satellite was designed to look at the universe in that radio waves that come from that time. Right? So this was designed, and there was one specific instrument called FIRAS, which I have labeled here, which is sitting at the center. And that instrument here, which I will come to, this was designed specifically to measure that radiation. So this was an instrument, and in all these difficult measurements, there is a lot of hard work that goes in engineering in building these receivers and carefully designing it so that you can measure what you want to measure and avoid what you don't want. There's a lot of radio emission that comes from Earth, from lots of transmitters, and yet you will have to be able to design something that can avoid all that and look deep into the universe. So there's a lot of design that goes into these instruments. The radio waves that come through the antenna go through beam splitters, get mixed, go to detectors that measure the spectrum. There's also calibration that has to be done to the instrument to exactly know what you're measuring for accurate measurements. All these are then built and put into a package. This entire horn that received the radiation was 2 meters long, and the entire rest of the optics fitted into a 50 centimeter receiver, which went inside here. That horn came out here and looked out at the universe in the satellite. So then this satellite was packaged. Right, that's where the satellite sits. This was all folded up. These panels were all folded up, and it was launched in 1989. And this measured that radiation from the distant universe, and this was the measurement. This is the measurement done by the satellite. Many of us, before the satellite went up, and later have made these measurements here at longer wavelengths. So this is frequency. So the wavelength increases here, the frequency increases here, and notice that this is 1 gigahertz, 10 gigahertz, these are at radio wavelengths. So various measurements were done. These are the satellite measurements, and we know that this is the distribution of that radiation with frequency. So this was an accurate measurement of the spectral distribution of that radiation from the early universe, from that surface. Okay, now what I've shown here is the kind of radiation that comes. So this curve here shows you the spectrum of the sun. This is the spectrum from the early universe. It is exactly like the spectrum of the sun, except it is shifted down somewhere here because the universe has expanded. And the shift from the spectrum of the sun to what we see here is exactly what tells us when we see that surface. So it tells us by what factor the universe has expanded from then. Okay? So this is an exact measurement of the spectrum of light from that surface. Yeah. So we are sitting out here. What we have measured in that radiation is the spectrum that comes from out here, which is far, far away. From when the universe was 1,000 times smaller, the age of the universe was actually 186,000 years at that time. So the light that we are seeing comes to us from a time when the universe was 186,000 years. We know that precisely. Right? So when we look out at the sky, we have lots of telescopes. We build optical telescopes, which many of you would have seen the sky through. We build radio telescopes. We build gamma ray telescopes. We have telescopes across the electromagnetic spectrum. We can look at the sky all the way from radio waves to gamma rays. And when we measure the light in various wavelengths, we measure lots of light that comes to us from lots of objects that are nearby, but there is this one radiation which does not come from any object here. This one radiation in radio wavelengths comes from out there. So when we look at the entire spectrum of the light that comes to us from the sky, there is all these parts that come from all these objects. But there is one part here which is really the most intense light that comes to us in the sky. And that comes to us all the way from that surface back there. It comes to us between the galaxies, between the stars, and it is there throughout the sky. And we have measured it with these instruments. Right? So that gives us a view of the universe at that time. Okay. So this is our view of the universe at that time, and this is a view of the galaxies. So that light from the distant past is like a backlight against which we see the galaxies. Right? So think of it as a backlight in radio waves, and in front we have all these objects that give us all the way from radio waves to gamma rays. But the backlight that comes between the galaxies is all in radio waves. And it has a specific spectrum, like the spectrum of the sun shifted. And this comes to us from time of 380,000 years after the Big Bang. Okay. So then we can ask, this radiation that comes to us, which we can measure with radio telescopes, should it be uniform? Or should there be structure in it? Should it have any differences? Should it be just blank? Right? This question has been asked. And actually, if you look at that, It's a vision of the universe at that time. And what we are asking is, was the gas uniformly distributed, or were there variations in the density from place to place at that time in the past? Now, anyone will say that all what we have today, planets, stars, galaxies, cannot come from nothing. Right? So in the past, there must have been something which grew to become what we are today. So we can actually calculate what must be the amount of structure in that past which will give rise to all the structure that we see today. And we can do that by just knowing the physics that works in the universe. So cosmologists have made these predictions. We know what the universe looks like today, the structure of galaxies, that there are galaxies, they are arranged in patterns, there are variations, there are regions devoid of galaxies. To get all the structure through gravitational forces acting on gas, we can ask how was the evolution in the past. And we can run the clock backwards, knowing the physics that we have today, and ask what was the state of the universe 380,000 years after the Big Bang. Because that is the universe that we are seeing in this light. Okay, so that physics has been worked out. And it has been worked out that the variations in matter there must be so small that we must see variations in brightness at the level of 1 part in 10 to the power 5. 1 part in 100,000. So it should be extremely smooth light, but there must be small variations in the brightness. And this is the variations that you must see if that matter would then grow with the physics that we know to work in our Earth, in our laboratories. If that matter distribution should grow with gravity to give rise to all the galaxies today, this must be the magnitude of the variations. And this exact prediction was made. So then the challenge was, can we go and measure the brightness of that radiation and see, can we measure the variations in brightness at this level? So that was the challenge. And to do that, there was another instrument put on this telescope itself, and that's called the differential microwave radiometer, which measured the differences between the radiation in different directions. So that was arranged in this ring here. You can see these horns, and I will show it to you in other pictures. So there were pairs of horns that looked out in different directions, and there was instrumentation built to measure tiny differences between the radiation that comes, the radio radiation that comes through two horns separated by 60 degrees. So these horns were placed on the sides of the basic system, and then the satellite was put around the Earth. It actually revolved around the Earth. It always pointed away from the Earth as it went around. And the satellite was also spinning, so it was always measuring differences between points on the sky, and those two differences were also rotating as the satellite rotated, and it went through a patch. And as the axis of this orbit changed over time, that patch also shifted, and after 6 months, it gave a differential map of the entire sky. So this map was made. A single horn would give you a uniform power, but the differential map, which was made by differencing the two horn antennas, give you a map, and that differences of temperature that were detected. This is an actual map that was made with a satellite. It gave us exactly 30 microkelvin, which is 1 part in 10 to the power 5. So that prediction was exactly borne out. Right? This is a prediction that was exactly borne out, which tells us that the variations in temperature are really variations in the density of gas at that time, and it is those variations in density that grew through the physics that we know in the laboratory, all the way from 380,000 years after the Big Bang till today. Right? That is the evolution. And we have a measurement here that matches the theory. That's how the physics and astrophysics go hand in hand. That's how the astronomy and astrophysics go hand in hand. Right? So remember that these are really visions of that early universe made with radio receivers. This cannot be seen in optical light because this is emitting as bright as the sun, but it has redshifted. The wavelengths have been stretched, and by the time they reach us here, it is already in radio wavelengths. In optical light, we cannot see this. If we can see it only in radio waves. And that's why these telescopes were built in radio waves. So this telescope that went up, the Kobe satellite, it had a 7-degree resolution on the sky. And then the challenge over the last decade has been to go to higher and higher angular resolution. Can we see finer and finer details of how the gas was distributed way back in the past. And so telescopes were built. So the important one, the next step was the WMAP satellite, which had electronics here, 2 dishes that looked out in 2 different directions, and this spun and went out, not just around the Earth, but it went all the way. So this is the Earth, this is the lunar orbit. The telescope was sent all the way out to what's called L2, far from the Earth, far from the moon, looking away from the sun, away from the Earth. And this then made a map. Where the COBE had made this map with certain poor resolution, now the WMAP made a much higher angular resolution image of that time of the universe. This is again an image of the gas distribution in that time. But we have done better than that. This is the best that we have done, and this was released just in February this year. Another satellite called Planck, which was built by Europe. This has again, this year, finished measuring, but much higher angular resolution, the variations in density at that time, and this is the map that it got. So we have gone better and better, and we are measuring the gas distribution in that early universe with greater and greater precision. But we can do better than satellites. We can also do things from the ground. And many groups on ground have built telescopes, because telescopes can be much bigger than what you can put in satellites. Right? So on the ground, specific telescopes have been built. So this is the kind of telescopes that we built to look at this early universe. These are what are called radio telescopes. Right? This is an array of dishes which were built at Chile. This is an array of horn antennas on top of a pedestal at the South Pole. These give you a higher and higher angular resolution. They are bigger and bigger. This is again a big telescope with an array of receivers at the focus, which give an array of beams on the sky and can do higher resolution. The best resolutions have gone with huge telescopes built as an array. Right? And each of these is 22 meters in size, and this whole thing covers an area of a few hundred meters, and we can go to real high resolutions, much more than what we can do with satellites. Many of us have been involved in these experiments over the last decade. But there's a house here where I lived for about 10 years doing this experiment with this telescope. So these are the kind of things that we have been involved in over the years. And these higher and higher resolution views have given us maps like this. These are actually very detailed maps of that time, actually made. And you can see the fine features. These are just small patches of the sky now, not the whole sky. And you can see the fine details. And notice something that you can see dark spots here. So this is a backlight, and in the foreground there are galaxies, there are clusters of galaxies, and they are absorbing the light that comes from the back, and so you see dark spots. Right? So this is a backlight. This is the structure in that backlight, the backlight that comes from the gas far, far away, when the universe was just gas. And in the foreground, as the light comes to us, there are these galaxies. And so as it comes through the galaxies, through the clusters, these clusters and gas dirt will absorb the light from the background. And therefore, you do see dark spots. And those dark spots, if you look at them with an optical telescope, you'll see clusters of galaxies with gas dirt. So all these images have told us how the universe was at a time 186,000 years from the Big Bang. We know, we have pictures of how the galaxies are distributed today. And it is the evolution of this picture at this time all the way to this, that is the subject matter of cosmology. This is what astronomy has done. And along with that, astrophysics, we have a cosmology theory based on the theory of gravitation. We have an understanding based on physical laws that are actually developed in the laboratory, that are known to work on Earth. There's nothing new. It is just that physics that we learn in textbooks can tell us how the universe was transformed all the way from here to here. This entire evolution is known just from physics that we know and study in textbooks here. So this is a complete picture that we have today. So we can ask this question, what next? If we have seen the universe all the way to that in that time, we see the universe today, right? We have an exact theory of how the universe evolved from that to this. What can we do next? This is what we have been doing in the last few decades. Now, if we look at this evolution, we are going in evolution all the way from here till today. And somewhere in this, evolution, that gas is known to have evolved, that gas is known to have clumped. The gas started with some minimal amount of clumping, and those clumps grew with gravity, and finally the clumps became stars, became galaxies, and transformed the universe to what it is today. Right? That's a theory, and that transformation is something we have never seen. We see the universe here. We see the universe up to here in optical telescopes. Those radio telescopes that I've shown you so far has shown us a view of the universe here. We have not built a telescope to see the universe in this entire time. This is a time where we have theories of how the universe would have evolved, but we have never actually gone and seen it. And what we are planning to do in the next 10 years, 20 years, is to begin to see the universe in this time. Now, during this time, there were no stars. It was just gas. So there is no light. So there is no way you can see the universe in that time with telescopes that we know. There is no way we can see the universe behind that, beyond that, because that's a time when the universe was hotter, denser. That's like going into the surface of the sun. We can't see into the sun. We can only see the surface. This is exactly like that. Right? So what astronomy can hope to do in the next few decades is to begin to look at this time. So during this time, what we expect is that the gas will slowly evolve, gas will slowly clump, begin to form stars. The first stars will give out light. That light will then go out to influence the gas around it, begin to ionize it, transform it, and slowly evolve the gas into galaxies, into stars with gas in between that is completely ionized. That is the evolution that we expect. How do we see that gas? Most of this time, the gas is hydrogen gas. Most of the gas in the early universe is just hydrogen and helium. 10 atoms of hydrogen to 1 atom of helium. That's the ratio that was created in the Big Bang, and that's what was there in this time. How do we look at hydrogen gas? Just neutral hydrogen gas with electrons and protons. So if you look at hydrogen gas, a hydrogen atom has a proton and an electron. These electrons and protons have spins. Spins are like magnets, and depending on whether magnets are parallel or anti-parallel, they have different energies. And atoms can actually flip in their spin, and therefore this will be two different energies. And because of that, it can emit radio waves at 1420 megahertz. Hydrogen can actually be seen in radio waves at 1420 megahertz. This is in radio waves, 1.4 gigahertz. So hydrogen in our galaxy has been seen in this light, in these radio waves. So what we can hope to do is to begin to ask, can we see the universe in those times in this radio emission? But remember that the radio waves that comes to us from gas in that time of the universe, they are emitted at 1420, wavelength of 21 centimeter. But by the time they come to us, they will be stretched because the universe is expanding. And therefore, they will not come to us at that wavelength, they will come to us at much longer wavelengths. They will come to us at wavelengths between 30 and 200 megahertz, much longer wavelengths. It's meters, tens of meters. So we have to build telescopes at these frequencies to look at the universe as it evolved all the way during those times. So what we expect in that evolution, as we evolve from that ionized gas, as it becomes neutral, that neutral gas has a certain population of atoms which are in parallel state and in the anti-parallel state. And it depends upon the number of atoms in the parallel and anti-parallel states that the gas either absorbs the background radiation or emits new radiation. That gas actually transforms over time. And we have a theoretical prediction of exactly how that gas will transform. We know that that gas will initially be extremely cool, and therefore it will begin to absorb the light from the background. Later, as the first stars form, the first stars will put out what's called Lyman alpha, ultraviolet light, which will then begin to cool the gas enormously and again absorb that background light. But quickly that ultraviolet will heat the gas, and that hot gas will then begin to emit. And then later, as the ultraviolet begins to ionize the gas will completely disappear. So we have an exact prediction of how the gas will evolve over time and how it will influence the background spectrum. And so we expect the background light that comes to us to have a certain shape in its spectrum across the frequency as it evolves over time. Here time is frequency. Right? Because light that leaves at a fixed frequency at a certain time in the past will come to us at a fixed frequency today. Every frequency here corresponds to a time in the past. Lower frequencies are way back in time, higher frequencies are closer. So this entire evolution in the spectrum of that light tells us how the gas properties evolved over time. So what we need to do to look at how the gas evolved, to make that measurement, is to simply make a measurement of the spectrum of that background light across these radio frequencies. Right? So what we need to do is to build low frequency radio telescopes, just radiometers, spectral radiometers, and so that brings us to radio astronomy. That's what we do. So in the last few years, we have built radio telescopes to start looking at this. This requires extreme precision because that background light that comes to us is already dim. It took us a fair amount of effort to detect it, but here we are talking of small variations in its temperature across frequency. We have so far measured its variations in space. Now we have to measure its variations across frequency. So this is a very difficult experiment. We think we will do it in the next few years. So we have been slowly building better and better telescopes which can make this precision measurement. This variation is also 1 part in 10 to the power 5, but it is variation in frequency. And remember, we have to build these things at frequencies which are of tens of megahertz, 80 megahertz, 100 megahertz. These are the frequencies at which FM transmissions are, television transmissions are happening. In spite of all that, we have to make these measurements on Earth. And going to space nearby doesn't really help you because the emissions from the Earth go out into space as well. So we have been in this project of making better and better telescopes that can make very accurate spectrum of the background, the skylight at radio frequencies. So some years ago, a student worked with me and built this. So this was our first design, a conical antenna that looked out at the sky. Actually, this is a nice design because high frequencies were picked up here, low frequencies were picked up here, and different parts of this telescope picked up different frequencies, which means different parts of this telescope picked up emission from different times. So we built this, we got experience, we did not achieve the accuracy that we needed. Then here another student joined me and we built this kind of a telescope. These are all built at Bangalore here in the Raman Institute. We have been building better and better receivers. This is another kind of a radio telescope that is looking out at the universe. More recently, we have built this kind of a telescope. This is a telescope where the receiver, see in this case the receiver was actually underground here. In this case, we put the receiver inside this. And these things are, we build it in the lab, we design it, we design based on previous experience, we build the entire receivers, and then we take it out. And we've been taking it out to various parts in Karnataka where there is very little FM and radio transmissions. We have also taken it, finally, this was also taken to 800 kilometers from Perth in the Western Australian desert where there's absolutely nobody. So we take it to the most remote parts of the world to try to get better and better measurements. That's what we are doing today. We have also built strange looking telescopes. So this is a different design that we tried with another student. So this is a design where we had two radio antennas here and we built a screen in between. And the screen basically takes radio emission from the sky and partially transmits it, partially reflects it into two antennas which then multiply the two signals. This is a different way of looking at the sky. So we have been trying different designs. We have been designing telescopes of different shapes and sizes for this problem. So we have been trying to design things specifically for this problem. And we have been making progress. In the next few years, hopefully we will have made this measurement. That's the state we are at. Now, as this universe evolves over time, it is also slowly getting structure. Galaxies are actually forming. So it is not just the spectrum that gives us information, but in this wavelength, in this radio light, we can also hope to make images of the sky at different frequencies and actually make pictures of the universe as it evolves, of the gas as it evolves. And we have predictions of what images should look like if we make images at 70, 90, 110, all the way to 160 megahertz. If we make images of the sky, we know that this is the way it should evolve. This is the theory. We have never made this measurement. Right? So the telescopes that I showed you, these telescopes and these are telescopes that we are building to just make the spectrum. But here, to make these measurements, we need much bigger telescopes to make images. To make images with high angular resolution requires much bigger telescopes. So we are doing that also. So we are also building telescopes to make images at these frequencies. Right? That's another thing that we are doing right now. So we are building telescopes with large areas with improved resolution and sensitivity to make images of the sky at different frequencies, and images in the radio waves at different frequencies translate to images of that gas at different times. So this is a project that we at the Raman Institute are involved in, and now these are big telescopes, so we are in collaborations. So we do international collaborations. So this is a telescope that's called the Murchison Wide Field Array, and here we are in a collaboration with partners in the US, Australia, and New Zealand. This is how the telescope looks like out in the field. There are patches. Each of these is about this big, and these are antennas, and they are receiving radiation from the sky, and they are going out in cables to a central site where they are all added together, they are multiplied together. This is an imaging telescope. This is the shape of telescopes that we build. And this is as a collaboration. All the receivers, the electronics receivers are made here in Bangalore in the Raman Institute. So we build the receivers here, and those receivers are built with cards that we design in the laboratories here at the Raman Institute. Their cards are also built in industry in Bangalore, and then we package them and put them out in the field. And this whole telescope is located 800 kilometers from Perth in the Western Australian desert. It's located at a site in a cattle station, which is about 100 kilometers in size. There's only one family living there. There is no FM, there is no TV, there's nothing there, it's radio quiet. So our engineers from here go out there, build these telescopes. They build the receivers that we build here in Bangalore are installed out there. And this is what it looks like. These are real pictures. So we have built these telescopes. There are 128 of these out in the desert. All these receivers are built out here in Bangalore. And then we combine all these. This is what it looks like. These are real pictures at the site. And it's been functioning. And we have been getting the data, and we have been analyzing the data. So this is something that we are doing, and we are improving upon it. And we know that this is not going to be able to do the problem in its totality. And we are still working towards building bigger and bigger telescopes to do more detailed imaging of that early universe as we learn from the experience of building these. So right now we have 128 tiles. In the next 2 years, it will become 256. And then we are planning in the next few years to increase that to 512. And there are opportunities here for more people to be involved in this bigger exercise. As we enlarge, we also have visions for the future. And eventually, these telescopes are going to build up into what is called the square kilometer array, which means array that goes into 1 square kilometer into a huge area. This is something that will happen in the next decade. So at that time, we expect that this array will grow to become a large number of such antennas out in the Western Australian desert, along with dishes and apertures. So this is the kind of telescopes that we expect to see in the next decade, after 2020s. Yeah, and I will end here. That's the vision for the future. Thank you.
One unmistakable thing that we would have all recognized during the course of this presentation by Professor Ravi is that this division between pure science and engineering is a very artificial one. And considering the kind of research that goes into observational cosmology these days, from Professor Ravi's presentation, it's very clear that this scientific research is very, very strongly dictated by technological innovations that can go on, so where engineers have a lot to contribute. And it was shining through his complete talk, a presentation, that the cosmological research that he is doing and the technological innovations that he is bringing about in the design of new radio telescopes and so on, it is amply clear that the future of observational cosmology has a lot to do with technology, and only that can help us make better models of the universe, and also to verify several of the fantastic theoretical predictions that have been made. So thank you very much, Professor Ravi Subramanian, for a wonderful presentation, and thanks to all of you for once again making it very lively through your questions. And we finally thank Mr. Ashok Lal and his team from the Video Hut Productions for making this wonderful recording of the entire program. So very shortly this will be on YouTube, so you can watch once again and tell others who have missed out on today's talk to watch on the internet. So next month, second Sunday, once again we will meet with a different speaker on a different topic, so you can watch out on our website for information sometime by the end of this month. So do come back again. So until then, thank you all very much.